Yo, 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 what is up? This is your boy, Joshua Taylor, host of Break into the Future, all things future. But right now, it's crypto and blockchain. We have an awesome, amazing guest, Anne Griffin. What is up?
Woo, I'm grateful to be here. And honestly, I want to be on any podcast. It's like breaking into the future. And so I'm happy to be here. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Yes, yes, I am too. I love your note cards in the back. We were talking about those.
Yeah, we were talking about those. I'm a product manager, so like even though some of these post-it notes behind me haven't been updated in a while, like people are like, this is very on brand for a product manager.
Yes, yes. And I brought those up because you said like some of them were your future ones. And I was like, oh yeah, this is the future because we're literally talking and it's the future,
Absolutely.
right into the future. But no, I would love to how we started off the show. So like the people want to know who Ann is. Who are you? Break it
Yeah.
down.
So I'm a product manager, product leader. I have a 9 to 5, but I also have two side businesses. One of which is specifically helping Black and people of color or professionals of color, specifically using LinkedIn to actually attract really amazing opportunities to them, and also how to get more interviews while applying to less jobs, and also how to negotiate more money. My other side gig is I do advising and consulting on product management, especially in the spaces of AI, blockchain. I have a couple of startups that I work with that I really love, really excited about. And I also do a lot of public speaking. I also have spoken at like Morgan State University, West Point, Columbia. The list goes on. But really, I just like to be able to talk to like people and learn from them. And they say they learn from me, which is really great. But I think one of the best things about all the things that I do is that I'm constantly learning new things. And I really think that like where we are at this point of history, it's like really critical to just be constantly learning, like breaking into the future. Like now is the time to upskill. And, there's ways to kind of build your life around constantly upskilling. And I'm definitely the kind of person that I learn from doing. So I'm always doing a lot.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to go back to school ever. And that's not a diss on school or anything, but
Yeah.
I definitely learned by doing.
Yeah, yeah. What does Ann Griffin not do? You're a product manager. You do speaking. You have two side hustles that could probably be full-time gigs. I love that. I love the LinkedIn thing. We're gonna have to get into that. There's so many ways
Yeah.
we can take this.
Yeah, especially because
Um,
people are always like, "Oh wait, how does that relate to anything else you just said?" And I'm like, "Well, how do you think I got these opportunities?"
yeah,
Right? Like I get companies like Facebook, Twitter, eBay. There's a huge list I actually keep of companies that have even just reached out to me in the last year. But I've also gotten speaking engagement opportunities as well from like places like LinkedIn and people finding me. I was actually in Marquise Brownlee's YouTube series. Oh my God. Oh wow, I can't believe I forgot the name of it. I'm in the robots episode of his YouTube series.
yeah. Is it
And
like
so
that robots episode? Cool. People
this,
look it up.
it's no, I'm gonna have to find the name. I think this is really just like, oh, we're in a pandemic type of brain fart because I
Yeah.
talk about it all the time, and I'm gonna find this for you.
It's
But
because we're,
like
it's because we're focused on the future. That's the past. That's why.
it's in the past, that's the problem. It's retro tech, actually. Funny enough, it's about the opposite. That's why we're in the
Retro tech.
future right now. That's why I couldn't
Yeah.
remember
See.
something called retro tech. But like, I got that because of my online presence. There,
Mhm.
people found my website, and honestly, I was just super honored to be a part of his series and also be able to nerd out about like famous robots through history.
Yeah.
So that was really great. But so that's the thing, is like that's how all the LinkedIn stuff relates to what I'm doing. Is I'm like, that's how I get all the opportunities I have now. And I want to teach other people, especially professionals of color, just because I think like we are much more in touch with like other things we need to be looking at in terms of like red flags in organizations, things that we care about that maybe other people don't look as closely at. So
Yeah.
that's why I also have that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the reason why this show exists. I being a founder of a tech company myself, and wanting to hop into the crypto blockchain space and realizing there weren't a lot of people that look like us.
There are not a lot.
Yeah, and we could talk about that. I'm sure you've been in the blockchain space longer than me. So I'd love to get you to like nerd into that intersection. We can get into that. But that's why the show exists, to show the 99% of the world of what the future is going to look like. At first, of course, we're focusing on crypto and blockchain, but it's much bigger than, as you know, it's robotics, AI, it's food, space, you name it. There's like everything is changing, everything's evolving. And I love that you talked about upskilling. So have you always been a PM, a product manager? And can you talk to everybody, the breaking gang, what a product manager really does? And then like, how did you find the blockchain movement?
Yeah, so I've been in product for most of my tech career, and I've been in tech, I think in January might be like 12 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
OG.
It's just like other people be like, that's not a very long time. Other people are like, well, you cracked a decade.
Yeah.
So I've been in product for most of that time. And I think really I've always been interested in, thinking about like, how do we decide what we build and why? And then getting to be in a very collaborative role. I've always just functioned better in collaborative environments. I'm always happiest in collaborative environments. And there came kind of a point in which I was in this job where I was like, I like being a product manager, but it feels like the work I'm doing is just the same thing again and again, and it's boring. And I started reading actually more about like AI and how they were talking about automation. And I was like, well, why does this article about how AI is going to take over the world and take all of our jobs keep reemerging? Like, why do people keep rewriting basically the same article again and again? And I was like, I don't know if at the time I was like, I don't know if yet I believe that in that period of time. But I was like, all I know is that I don't want to be the person where I'm like 50 years old and I'm dedicated my whole career to a company or two. And they're like, sorry, we're hiring somebody who has like 5 years of experience, which more power to people with 5 years experience. Cause I at one point only had 5 years experience, but like being like, yeah, we don't really need you anymore. You cost us too much money. You're like outdated and you don't have any of the right skills. And I was like, okay, so now's a really good time to start learning about these emerging technologies, because even though AI has been around like for, a bit, I think the term itself was coined in the 1940s at the conference in Dartmouth. I was like a lot of the newer things that people are doing with it are really starting to bubble up now. And then blockchain, I didn't know a ton about blockchain, but I kept hearing about this thing called Bitcoin. And I kept hearing about this thing called Bitcoin. And I actually a part of this organization I'm a part of called Tech 2025. I was being an emerging tech correspondent for them. Shout out to Charlie. Charlie is the CEO and founder of Tech 2025. And she had me go on this assignment. I went to this meetup called Are We in a Cryptocurrency Bubble? This is in 2017. And I was like, this is fascinating. So I was supposed to go there, see who is there, why they're there, what they're interested in. How are these like, the people where it's like they've been in, the crypto space since like Bitcoin began? Is this like newbies? Is this finance people? Like who is all at this type of event? And then what is the spy? Yeah, like a spy. But I'm like, you can notice that at any event you go to. And also like, what does this person have to say about, are we in a cryptocurrency bubble? I was like, at the time, I didn't even have any crypto. And so I went and I was like, okay, I still have a lot to do. I still need to read the Bitcoin white paper. At that point I did. But I think I understand how this works at a high level and why myself and others should be learning about this and getting into this. And so I wrote the article. You can actually find it on the Tech 2025 website today. It's called Are We in a Cryptocurrency Bubble? And the thing is that I was like, okay, this is great. And so I was like, also like, I'm going to learn about blockchain and this type of thing. Cause I was like, it's so early that while some people have been in this space for like several years, and that's considered being an OG at the time, 2017, being in blockchain like 3 to 5 years was being like an OG in blockchain.
Yeah.
You know, even someone 1 year ahead of you in the game was like, whoa, this is nuts.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know, compared to other fields, right? I was like, the barrier to entry is so low. And this didn't even exist when I was in college. So I was like, if I just learn about blockchain and also how it impacts, you know, my career as a product manager and technology that we would, you know, use to build solutions that actually help people,
Mhm.
you know, I'm like, these things might help extend my career in technology. Because we all know like technology can be pretty ageist, and also we know companies can too. Obviously, people can be like, you can consult after a certain point, start your own company, which I mean, I hope eventually to start my own company. I'm not quite there on my own like full-time endeavor company. But that was something that really sparked my interest and got me interested. And like a year later, I actually got a job at one of the startups that were part of Consensus in 2018 before the 2018 crypto crash. And so it was really fascinating just being, because I used to actually, even though they were remote first, I actually used to go into the New York office every day.
Mhm.
And I just learned so much from the other people at other startups there, even just overhearing what people were saying. There only were like 2 conference rooms. So like you overheard all the other startups also having their Zoom calls. Cause again, everything's remote first. So it was just kind of like chaos in a room because everyone's having Zoom calls with completely different people at the same exact time in the same room.
Yeah.
And but like you would learn so much because you would hear things and be able to kind of like search for them. So there were things that you knew from through your own research, but then there were things you were learning because there are things that you're overhearing that you know nothing about because it's related to what someone else is building. I don't mean this in like a, oh, we're going to take their idea, but they're talking about technologies where I was like, what is that? Like, how
You're
does
just
that?
being thrown at, you're
Yeah.
just learning at such a high, fast rate.
Yeah. And that's what really got me into blockchain. And this was something where I was like, because originally at the start, I was like, oh, wow, cryptocurrency is really interesting. But then I was like, what can you do outside of crypto? Especially as like and granted, like there's plenty of product managers who actually are in the crypto space explicitly. It's a great place, but I was also very interested in what what specifically can you do even outside of crypto? Like what are people saying that you could do? And the startup I was a part of was a legal tech company that was using blockchain. And so
Mm.
I was like, oh, this is fascinating. Like what other applications are there?
Yeah.
And so I learned, you know, what you can do with supply chain, what you can even do with HR, like lots of different applications. I actually did a course for O'Reilly called Business Applications of Blockchain. And it was really fascinating because there were a lot of people who would join who were developers where they were like, I'm not expecting to learn to code because this was not a coding class, but they were like, I want to understand from someone who's not just trying to sell me their latest IPO or promoting a specific coin. I just want to understand like how blockchain works, but in everyday simple language that I can understand, and then understand how and why I might use this technology.
Yeah. Business application.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Nice. So what you were like super endorsed in this like new thing, a new, I guess, layer of technology like the blockchain. Um, what happened after working at that startup with Consensus?
Yeah. So I think the question might be also why did you leave this space? So I didn't explicitly leave blockchain intentionally. It was more of like I was in that space. I mean, the thing I can't really say like what exactly happened because I was there. I'm not privy to all the details, but I'll just say the incubator we were part of. Um, I think the majority of it was mostly funded by gains from Ethereum.
Uh,
And if you know, there was a major crash in 2018.
like a
Um,
90% correction.
there are articles that you can read online about what happened to that specific incubator as well as that crash if you are very interested. Um, but like basically the funding situation changed a little bit, and a lot of us were like looking for new work. I, as a product manager, was like, first and foremost, as much as I'm like, I love emerging technology. I want to be immersed in that space. And it's also just fun because you can be so creative.
Mm.
At the same time, I was like, I care a lot about being at a place that is going to respect me. I'm going to have a good manager who protects me and stands up for me.
Mm.
And, you know, I can also work on a product I'm passionate about. And I was really passionate about my blockchain product, but kind of coming across like another full-time job outside of the blockchain space in the travel space, I was like, oh, this is really cool. And the thing is like, I think the biggest thing is regardless of whatever your 9 to 5 is, if you're someone who has a 9 to 5, you can always and should always still be learning outside of that. It doesn't mean you have to order a textbook that's like 5 inches thick.
Yeah.
You know, it means like listening to the podcast, like, you know, when you learn something, teaching somebody else how that works, like reading articles, especially like things if you see people who write a lot on Medium, you know, that's great because some of these things change every 3 months, or even following the right people on Twitter. There are some really great resources, and even just meeting other people in the space, because there's some people where they're in different parts of their blockchain journey, or there's people where like they're super seasoned in one area but less seasoned in another. So you might see somebody as an OG, and then you ask them about like a specific area. Like one area I'm much newer to is like NFTs.
Yeah.
You know, I'm much newer to that, and like I have a overall idea how it works, but am I going to purport myself to be an expert on the technology? No. Do I have ideas of what you could do with that as a product? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really like kind of being around those people, because if you and people around you aren't ever talking about it, right? I'm not saying to dump your friends for only people in crypto and blockchain, but I'm saying you might want to expand your circle to include some of those people, because it helps to be able to talk it out, especially with people that you know and you can trust. So you're not always feeling like, oh, if I go to this conference, is everyone going to be talking over my head if I'm still learning? And that's okay to go to conferences and have people say things that you don't understand, right? Because you can Google when you get home. It's just also nice to have people that are you know that you can talk to, and they're going to help you learn.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we met on Twitter.
Yeah, we met on Twitter.
Yeah. So I think
I follow him. So that's the other things. I'm always learning from people on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's like one of my favorite learning places, when it's not just, I mean, people freaking out about the current state of the world. I'm not saying you shouldn't freak out. It is kind of dark, but I'm just to
like
say
somewhere in that corner.
Sometimes I can't see anything. I don't see anything related to like certain topics, because it's just like, oh no, what asteroid is about to hit us now?
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's opened up a big, I think, in my brain, like there is a lot of crazy things going on in the world. Like crypto Twitter is a crazy thing in itself.
Oh my God. And it's so interesting too, because there's people on there who really know what they are talking about. And there's like, I feel like there's different tiers of crypto Twitter and even NFT Twitter, right? Because I think it's like wild. And somebody did this whole thread on NFTs, and I think it applies to just crypto in general. And I don't remember who did it, so I apologize if you're listening and you're like, oh, that was my thing. I give you credit. I just don't remember your handle or your name. But they talked about, and again, it applies to crypto as well, where they're talking about like, there's people in this space where they're going to be talking about things that maybe like your average everyday person like shouldn't be participating in, because like they don't have the type of money to do those type of things. Don't risk your whole, I mean, some people might say to do it, but I was saying like, don't risk things that you can't afford to lose. Period. Whether it's crypto, NFT, or completely off the blockchain, try not to do that. Not a good strategy. And then there's people where it's like, you're going to be your everyday people, and like maybe they're less engaged in, or maybe they're just learning, and like they may have some really great insight because they're at the level you're at in terms of like knowledge, or maybe just above the level you're at. So there's like less of a distance in like the knowledge level, and possibly also like the financial level. And then there's also people where, you know, and this person didn't say this in this thread, but there's also the people where they engage in all those communities as a scammer, and they make it sound like they're part of like the people who are on Twitter and all these other communities sounding really smart, never admit to being wrong about anything, but they're really there to like scam people. Because I think that one of the things is like on Instagram, I once had someone contact me because on my Instagram it says I'm in the blockchain world. Sorry, one second. Okay, sorry. There's like, Actually, I'll just make it part of the podcast. For those of you listening, I have food being delivered, and I don't know what's going on with the delivery person, but they're making it very hard for my husband to get the food.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Good.
Okay. But so basically I had so people know from some of the things I post on Instagram, from what's in my profile, that I'm in the blockchain space. And I once had somebody who follows me reach out to me because they were like, hey, this happened to me. Somebody gave me the steps to open up a crypto wallet and all this other stuff. And basically they taught them how to correctly open up a crypto wallet. But then they were like, I need you to transfer this coin to me and this other, and here's my key, send it to me. And they did. And they like were out like $600 US.
Yeah.
And they were, and I was like, yeah, you got scammed. And unfortunately there's like nothing that you can do about it. You know, like it's gone forever, because they just didn't understand what's going on. And the person seemed really nice. They seemed like they were helping them.
Mm-hmm.
But this one of those things where once it's gone, like in that kind of situation, it's, I mean, the same thing is like, it's like sending somebody Venmo money. Like there's not a lot Venmo's going to do to help you get it back. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where if you don't feel safe doing something, then you should wait it out.
Yeah. I guess that's a great point. Like, I think crypto can be like, even for us, right? Like, even to understand Bitcoin, you're not like, it's a journey to get there, right? It's not like, I read the white paper and I'm good. It's like really a process to learn it, because it's new. It's actually technology, right? Like, the iPhone isn't technology. It's just a part of our lives, right? It's not really innovative.
It's all the other things in it that are constantly evolving.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, it doesn't really work all the way yet, right? Like, Bitcoin works like as a, it is peer-to-peer payments, right? It is a store of value, which has evolved into, right? But you have all these other part of the crypto world in these different blockchains. And I would love for you to explain what a blockchain is. I don't think we've ever done that here.
Okay.
But yeah, just like, it may just be like a long learning curve for people. And like, I don't know if you heard that story that it went trending, that guy, he was an NFT guy, but he like lost like tons of ETH. Projects.
I heard about this.
It got a lot of attention. This dude was kind of an experienced guy, experienced person. I guess and you see like Gary Gensler, which is the SEC chair, and Senator Warren is she's doing what she does. How do you
shadowy super coders? That's what we are.
Yes,
shadowy super coders. You found us. If you're listening to a podcast, you found us. It's us.
Got us. But like, I guess I'm drawing to say like how, like, even like Venmo, right? They're more of a fintech Web 2 layer, right? They just use Visa rails, really. How do you really protect people, right? I think regulators, governments gonna want to step in, but like, how do people really protect themselves in that environment? When we're only going to get more digitized, more things will go on chain. Maybe if you explain blockchain to people, and we could just talk about like that whole like, oh my gosh, it's scary, I don't know. Yeah.
So something, I'm gonna preface this beforehand. I know a lot of people, their first impression, because this is also what like the government, not the whole government, but certain people in the government try to paint, is there's this false impression out there that that blockchain and crypto are completely anonymous. And that's just not true, because basically the concept behind blockchain is that it's a digital ledger, right? And so let's think about like, people keep saying ledger, digital ledger. It's it's an immutable, public ledger, if you're using a public blockchain, which maybe we'll get to that public versus private thing today. Maybe. Yeah. But so like the idea, like Bitcoin is on a public blockchain, Ethereum's on a public blockchain. It's, it's public, it's immutable, basically meaning that like you can, once you put a record in, it cannot be changed. Mm-hmm. But like when we say like it's a ledger, what does that exactly mean? Right? And just think about it, it's like when you think about, you know, if anyone's seen A Christmas Carol, there's like you've possibly seen Ebenezer Scrooge like writing in his accounting books about like this is how much money this person owes me, and this is how much money this person owes me, and this is how much I paid this person.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you had a big book, and then eventually people started using Excel sheets, and now we have all this expensive software for. So that is what that's like a ledger, right? And so when we talk about like usually these things where it's like, okay, a ledger is like, okay, if it's an Excel sheet, right? It lives on my machine, but it's not public. And I have the ability to lock that Excel sheet. But the thing with blockchain is that anybody who has like a node can actually write to and save to the blockchain. The only thing is you can't edit anybody else's entry. So now we're thinking about like, we have a ledger here. Let's say this is like, let's pretend like blockchain is like an immutable, like unchangeable, like Excel sheet, right? So that means that if it's like, let's say I send you like 0.5 of a Bitcoin, which is still a ton of money, right? Like I send you 0.5 of a Bitcoin. We put that down in the Excel sheet.
$23,000, $24,000.
Yeah, I send you that, right? That goes in there, and the thing is like before it goes in there, everyone basically confirms like, yes, we confirm, everyone who has a node, which is like, imagine it's like all of our friends are like witness to like, yes, she sent him the money. We're good, right? Instead of just being like, okay, we're going to get one impartial person to agree that, yes, she gave him the money. We're going to put this down in this ledger, which can never be changed. It's like everyone is technically like a witness to this transaction, right? And then once all the different nodes or witnesses or whatever are like, cool, we agree that that did happen, then it gets like saved there. Because once it's saved in there, you cannot actually change that record. You can put another record later, like below it in this Excel sheet, right? And I'm using Excel as an example. Blockchain is not an Excel sheet, just so people who are listening are clear.
Well, the blockchain. Yeah.
If it's your first time listening to it, I could definitely understand how it'd be confusing. You can, and so like, let's say, you know, Joshua now sends, you know, like $25 to one of his friends. Me and all of our friends are now witness to that transaction. We're all like, cool, that actually did happen. It's not some sort of like fake thing that somebody initiated. We're going to save that into this ledger, into this Excel sheet. So it goes in like row 2, right? And so let's say we get to a certain point where we're like, great, we filled up this Excel sheet. We can't add anything else to this Excel sheet. We're now going to, you know, basically make this like one link on the chain, and we're going to open up a new Excel sheet where we're going to start like a new empty page to like record the other transactions on the blockchain. And then we're going to link all these different Excel sheets together. So not only is each transaction, like where it lives in the Excel sheet is in like row 1, row 2, row 3, row 3, row 4. Also like this Excel sheet coming before this Excel sheet, the sequence that those are saved and like attached to each other matters. And that's how they created this trustless system, that they're like, we don't need a trusted, impartial intermediary to basically be like, yeah, he sent that person $25. It becomes this thing where it's like, everybody saw it, so we don't really need this intermediary. And how that relates, so this can be with, you know, HR records. It can be with, here's the money we sent to each other, some money transactions. It can be like, yes, we guarantee that the temperature of this specific truck didn't go outside of this range to make sure that these mangoes were at the right temperature the whole way between Florida and Georgia or something. You can use it for a lot of different applications. And the thing is originally this became a big thing for those of you who, some of you may know the story, but for those of you who don't, with Bitcoin, and this was created for that purpose because after the like 2008, 2009 financial crash, the story is whoever Satoshi is, that person or peoples, you know, maybe me. No, it's not me.
You got the orange blouse on, so might be.
I mean, Satoshi would never say that they are Satoshi.
Satoshi is far gone.
But like, so the thing is that the idea was that whoever Satoshi is or they are basically said, So why are we trusting the banks when they are clearly bad at their job? They knew that this was very risky, giving these loans to people who might not be able to pay them back after like one missed paycheck or all this other stuff. And they're like, you guys aren't managing risk really. And shouldn't we just have a way to not have to deal with the banks if they are not trustworthy themselves? And so hence having, a financial instrument that is based on a peer-to-peer trustless system where pretty much everyone who is a node on the Bitcoin blockchain is a witness in a way. And like basically that's where it's like when we talk about cryptography, their witnesses, like they basically perform, a cryptography puzzle to be able to save things to the blockchain. And everybody's like, great, this is saved to the blockchain. We know it's real. And again, you can't go back and edit. So when it comes to like records where it's like people are like, oh, we should do birth certificates of blockchain. Well, what happens if people are like, well, actually, my parents, I came out and I had certain parts, but I've always identified as like a different gender, right? Than the one that people assigned to me at birth, right? Mm-hmm. So that's something where that becomes a problem. You'd be able to maybe add a different, like a different, like I'll say like a row in an Excel sheet, but you're not going to be able to go back and completely erase that, oh, this person used to be considered this other gender. Mm-hmm. And so that's like an overview. And for those of you listening, if you miss certain parts, that's totally okay. Take the parts you did understand and Google it, because as you're learning, there's going to be things you get and there's going to be things where you're like, didn't quite get that one, but I'm making it there. I just always like to people who are like new to things and learning not to feel discouraged if they don't understand something.
Yeah. I'm sure both of us took us a while to understand these concepts, especially you did in 2017. So it was probably even more unclear, right? A lot less education out there. And this is how you learn, just like putting in the hours, putting in the reps, and like we're here before you all doing all the homework so you guys can learn in an easy way. And you're explaining it awesomely. And I have a question on the blockchain, right? Like these nodes, these digital miners are being able to validate these transactions across the world. And basically what you're saying is, say it's me, you, all across the world, we're providing consensus that this payment is legit. So we don't need an institution or a middleman, woman, intermediary to say, hey, I'm going to send you money or that is legit, right? Because banks were sent to protect your money back in the day, right? Mm-hmm. You didn't have to fear them coming in, raiding your house with a spear, right? Swords and all that. So, but what about if I accidentally sent you one Bitcoin and I meant to send you a fourth of a Bitcoin, right? Like you said, there's no double spending, right? You can't go back and there's no redo button, right? Like, or I can't call the Bitcoin Node Association and be like, yo, I need my Bitcoin back. Why is that so? And why can't we do that?
Yeah. So part of that is, again, it's all peer to peer. So now you have to, if you accidentally send me one whole Bitcoin, then, and I basically block you on every social network and never talk to you again, right? There's no like intermediary that says, well, here's your money back. You didn't actually mean to do that. Cancel payment, right? And that's the whole thing where it's like, it's good in certain cases where you're like, I don't want an intermediary in this. And then other cases you're like, maybe my life isn't completely ready for no intermediaries at all, right? Yeah. And so the thing is like today, if you like send me $1,000 or $3,000 or like, I don't know, like $50,000, that's something where if you're like, wait, there's a mistake, and you can kind of say like, this, maybe I scammed you and like I misrepresented who I am or what I do, or maybe it's something where it's like, I genuinely made this mistake, and because you're my bank, you want me to not be broke because you make money off of my money. So I'm going to try to help you, right? With like, there's no like magical Bitcoin tribunal, because then it becomes this whole thing of like, there is technically intermediary because there has to be like a finite number of people. Because like, it's not becomes no longer a cryptography problem, right? It becomes like a financial problem and a legal problem of like, do I owe you this money back? And it becomes a thing where Ethereum, I think, tried to solve for some of this, where it's like they have smart contracts, right? Where it's like if you write a smart contract that says, if this happens and this service is rendered, and you click some button that says like, yes, service was rendered, send the money, then it's like, okay, great. Like you can send me the correct amount of ETH, right? And it's written into the contract. You can review it. It's not just like a, well, I sent this to, you direct, I mean, it's still you directly, but it's like, I feel like there, because with smart contracts, there can be interfaces that are human readable.
Yeah.
And you can kind of be like, oh, okay, I understand what is going on here before I sign off. And then that way you actually have a legal document that actually like, the smart contracts actually have the ability to have like an interface that looks more like a legal document, and have people actually be able to sign it and say like, yes, I agree, when this happens, this is what's going to happen. And then it's kind of like, well, you signed this. So versus like this whole thing of like, without smart contracts, and this is not like smart contracts solve for all of this, because you can still mess up a smart contract and not read things and sign on the things you don't mean to. But like, if you just send me a Bitcoin today, and there's really no recourse if, like, again, like I just were to vanish with like a whole Bitcoin when you went to send me like 1/4, which is like a thing where I know, like, I'll say outside of the parts of the government that are just like completely scared of regular citizens using cryptocurrency, there are parts of the government that are actually trying to do threat casting on this and try to understand of like, what does the world look like if in theory we were to go to a completely cashless society that potentially also is like a public blockchain based cryptocurrency financial system, which we're not saying we would go there, but the government actually has people who are like in charge of figuring out what are potential futures and what are the likelihood and what would be things we would need to look for as signs that future is happening. And so the thing is, I'm like, what if our generation is saving for retirement and then we have a bunch of it in crypto, and then we accidentally send too much to somebody else, and like that's our retirement savings, and there's like nothing that happens, right? And so it's like there's certain things where I know some people are like, no, I love being completely independent and I'm just not going to do this ever. It never would happen to me. And then there's other people that are like, yeah, I don't know if I trust myself to do that, especially if it ends up being like potentially retirement money. And some people are like, I would never put retirement money in crypto. But it's like, we're not at retirement age yet or near it. And so like what the world looks like and what we choose to put our retirement money in could be very different by the time we get there. And so it brings a lot of questions of like, do we end up having like weird crypto intermediaries that people optionally use because they're like, I can't be trusted with all that.
Yeah, you're getting there. So basically you're saying, hey, replacing the old with something that looks similar, but it's new, like a crypto bank or a custodian, which we could talk about that. What do you think about that, right? Like banks were made to protect your money and help you create interest on that. We know interest rates, right? Fractional reserve lending, Ann and you and your husband put $1,000 in the bank. They take 90% of that and loan it out to businesses so they could make a spread on the money you put in versus the money they loan out at multiple times more. And so, right, it's not even advantageous for me to put my money in the bank, but like my money in BlockFi or Anchorage, or even I could stake it, which is just saying, hey, I'm not going to take my money out of a crypto exchange like Coinbase or Kraken or Binance. There's tons of exchanges.
Yeah.
And I could stake it for an APY, which is just an annual percentage yield on your it's interest. They're giving you higher interest because there's higher risk on that return. Can you talk more of what you know about that? Like, hey, I trust BlockFi to store my money. I trust these new crypto banks. And like, do you think that's true innovation? Like, what do you think about that? These new institutions, when like the whole premise was like peer to peer, you're really what we were saying, right? If I can handle it on my own, I'm a self-sovereign. Like, I'm an individual, I have my digital wallet, like I'm a free person, kind of the libertarian-esque type of thing.
Yeah, I will say this is a very controversial topic in the blockchain community. It is like
we went there.
People are ready to fight you over your answer to this.
Yeah.
So, and for those of listening, you don't know why people want to fight, right? The people who are like, I'll say like blockchain and crypto purists, like they have this idea that they're like, well, the whole point of this was to get away from that. And you're just really building the new system, but with blockchain. And absolutely never, ever, I'm never going to participate in that, like over my dead body. Yeah. Right.
They're all the way in.
I remember I went to a meeting once at the incubator that I was a part of, and they were like, they asked the question, how many people in here are crypto anarchists? And like a quarter or more of the room raised their hand. And I was like, Googling, what is
a crypto anarchist?
Right. But like, there's those people where they're like, I don't want anybody in my stuff. I'm going to just have to be self-reliant. Like, great. I think for the average person, I mean, honestly, if you look at this pandemic, I think this shows the average person cannot take care of themselves, much less their own money. You know, like, and it's some of that is like circumstantial, but some of it is just like, you know, I think these things will be necessary for crypto to become even more mainstream, right? And I mean, like, if we're going to do this as like, people aren't just trying to use this as like, I'm just day trading to make a ton of money. We're actually going to use it as a currency, right?
Cryptocurrency.
People are going to be like, wait a minute, right? Like if I'm going to use it as a cryptocurrency, as a currency, like to buy food at a restaurant, or like I'm going to pay for groceries with it. I don't want to risk like losing that, right? Yeah. I don't want to risk this. And I think people will put together products that contain like different crypto coins and things. I mean, people are already doing that, like into like ETFs and all this other stuff, and for like people to invest for retirement. Yeah. And while that's not direct, and the purist would never probably buy that, you know, I think for everybody else, like these are things that they're going to want custodians. They're going to want these like crypto banks because at least I'll say like to start, right? Maybe we get to a place where the technology makes it so it's so easy. It's easy and secure at the same time that people don't feel like the need for that. But I think with where things are now, it's not that the UI is bad, but it's not like what I'll call idiot proof. Yeah. Where it's like you take like the dumbest thing anyone could possibly do and then be like, wait, I need to undo that. Yeah. And nothing can be 100% idiot proof, but like, you know, like how, like people are going to want to be like, if I'm going to put my money in this thing, and more people are like, wait, I should probably buy into this. They're going to want it to be idiot proof from like whatever their brain does on their worst day. Like how many people are going to lose their private key, or like, you know, how many people, you know, like there's so much stuff like that, or get like locked out of their account and those kind of things. So,
yeah. And then you have 5 exchanges you're using minimum. Right. Explain what UI is for the break-in gang.
Oh yeah. So UI stands for user interface. So anytime you're using like a website or something like that, the thing that you see as the customer is the user interface. So there's technology behind all that that's called like usually called backend or backend engineering. And those are usually like services and like APIs, which are like, you know, basically things that make do the heavy lifting behind the scenes that you don't see as the customer, that make it so that you can log into Grubhub and, you know, make it so that like when you click on a restaurant, it actually gets the menu from that restaurant into Grubhub, right? Like they do all that stuff. And the UI is the thing that you see that's presented in front of you of like jerk chicken wings, $8.
Yeah. Nice. And then you have the UX side, which is
User experience, which is like kind of different side, same coin in a way, because oftentimes user experience people, like you would say maybe a designer works more on the user interface, and people can say user experience is more wireframes, but I think that's blurring a lot these days. And the person who's the designer ends up also being the user experience person, and like ends up being in charge of like the entire user interface.
Yeah. Can you do one without the other? It's kind of hard.
I used to be like, I used to work at a digital ad agency, and I used to work with a lot of UX people and design people, and they were separate disciplines, related but separate disciplines. And there was a group where like, I mean, they made the wireframes for the UI, but that was it. And there was a group where they did the design for the UI, and that was it. And they didn't cross disciplines. They were separate disciplines.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Now it's kind of like, I very rarely end up working at a place where there's a separate UX person than a separate design person.
What for the user interface, user experience side, right? Like crypto has gotten a lot better in the last 4 years since you joined, but we still have a lot of challenges. Is it just more talent getting in the space, or just like, hey, we just need to keep it? Like, how do we get to the next level where it's like, I'm just using this and then just, wow, I don't even have to think, like you said.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. Some of it is technical constraints. And as certain things get better, some of the interfaces can get better, because if you don't have the technology to support something, it's really hard to make an interface that actually also supports, like basically, like for example, imagine if Grubhub had no way to get the menu from a restaurant, and you just had to type in what you thought they had and like request it, and then they sent you back a thing that says like, yes or no, we have the jerk wings today.
Yeah.
You know, instead of you being like, oh, it says they have jerk wings, I'm going to click add to cart, right?
Yeah.
And so as the technology kind of evolves, it makes it so that it can actually support like better, more clear interfaces. The other piece of what I see is like sometimes people getting too excited about something. They're like, I want to use the technology for this. Without actually thinking about like, well, who is really your customer? And if is that customer an early adopter of blockchain, or is that like the average person who literally doesn't understand anything about this?
Yeah.
And sometimes people design for a much more advanced user than they actually have, right? Which can kind of bleed into this whole thing of like creating an interface where it's beautiful, but the average person doesn't really understand like why they're doing certain steps, or like why it's necessary, or what, like, for example, like if you're doing something and you're like, wait, why do I need like MetaMask? Like, why am I signing into this? Like I already signed into your app and now I'm signing into another app, right? Like those are things where, like, you know, and for those of you listening, it's like an Ethereum wallet, and it's like very, very popular, like it's like pretty,
probably the number one wallet right now.
What?
It's probably the number one digital wallet right now.
Yeah. So the thing is that it's like people who are new to the space are going to be like, wait, but I just bought ETH on Coinbase, and now there's this MetaMask thing. Especially because if you go to Coinbase doesn't be like, hey, so did you set up your MetaMask? Did you set up this? Like, what's going on?
You don't even need a Coinbase wallet. It could just sit on the exchange.
Yeah, exactly. And so, which we don't recommend for those of you listening. That's a whole nother story, another day. Just Google it.
See, it's a lot to learn. So it's
a lot to learn. One day at a time, one step at a time, one Google search at a time.
Or Brave browser. I use Brave.
Or Brave browser. Yes.
We'll put it in the description.
But yeah, so it's honestly, I lost my train of thought for a second, but it's okay.
Yeah, we were talking about like I log into Coinbase.
Oh yeah. So the UI UX thing, or it's like, yeah, like sometimes it's like we design something that's absolutely gorgeous, but we like leave out certain steps because we think once users get it, it'll be very obvious, but we forget that sometimes it is an uphill battle getting users to really understand it. So we get people to sign up, they try everything out, and then they never quite figure it out and they abandon.
Mhm.
and like a startup ends up in this cycle of trying to get people to actually consistently use the product. And because they started with like an interface that people like didn't help hold people's hand enough along in the process,
Yeah.
and now they're like rushing to do a redesign. I'm like, depending on how much runway you have, for some people they're well funded, great, not a problem. For people who are like, I'm bootstrapping, it could be the difference between like, yo, I exhausted my life savings
Yeah.
and like, oh, like, you know, so it's like, I think that's a really key thing, is because oftentimes we design for things that like the universe understands. And it's not very often we're designing for things where it's like, let's just assume 90% of people have no idea what this process is or how it works or why they should do this or why they should trust this even.
Yeah.
Especially when you have government people in government, elected officials who are saying things like people who do this are shadowy super coders, right? So the trust is another.
Sorry.
All good, all good. It happens.
Yes. Yeah. So where do you think that, I have two questions, last questions. Where do you think the space is going in the next, I guess, 2022 next year? Where will we be? And then given all the regulation talks and just like everything going on in the world that we talked about before, do you think crypto has a bright future, blockchain has a bright future, or more of a darker future?
I think it has a brilliant future for several reasons. You know, the banks have been trying to figure out the blockchain things since 2017. They've been talking down on it while secretly having, I mean, it's that secretly, like just very quietly having teams that have just been figuring out like their own blockchain products, and so that they can like be custodians for crypto, put together their own financial products that are based on crypto. You know, that's one thing. They act like they're not interested because it's going to disrupt them, but the reality is that they're the banks are trying to figure it out. We're seeing stuff with like Panama, right? I think the whole world is watching what Panama is doing, because I think they've switched. Yeah, they switched to Bitcoin as their official currency. I think everyone gets like $30 worth, 30 USD worth of Bitcoin.
Yeah, El Salvador was first.
Oh, so El Salvador, I think is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, a
And
lot
so,
of Latin American countries are in discussions, and Panama, I think, is one of them as a Central American country, though. So
yeah, and so there's that, and I think it makes it so that it's like this is this, and like China is trying to come up with their own, or already has come up with their own, right?
they've been testing in different provinces their own CBDC.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. So CBDC, where it's like, you know, the central banks, where it's like now there's that whole idea of like digital central banks, and like those conversations have been happening, like just like how much it has increased.
Yeah.
You know, I think that is like amazing. Like I'm just like, whoa, like I never heard about it like really last year, and like where the realms I hang out in.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hearing a lot about it now.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things where I'm seeing that. And the other piece where I think this has a bright future, regardless of what party you support, the pandemic has really made people distrust the government.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something where I think, whether it's because you are like, I was absolutely terrified when Trump was president and and I was scared all stuff was going to happen and things could get really dark, and what happens if, you know, you have basically a repeat of the Holocaust, where they actually seize people's money and their assets and their lives and all this other stuff, right? It was more than money and assets, right? We're talking about lives, families, but also like even the people who survived, like didn't necessarily get to inherit their, you know, their family's wealth. And so that impacts generational wealth. And you have other people on the other side, regardless of what party they support, who are looking at what the government is doing with like vaccine mandates, whether you're pro or against it, just looking at this objectively, you can just say there are people out there who are very against the vaccine mandates. They're very scared by them and would be potentially propelled into cryptocurrency because they're like, this is the thing that finally made me like, the government's interfering in too much of my stuff. I need to get in more things that are like not regulated by the government. Though that's the other thing,
Well,
is that the government has some ability to regulate it. For example, like even if you are doing things with cryptocurrency, you owe taxes unless you're just sitting there not touching it, right? Buying it doesn't, you don't owe taxes, but you sell it, you do other things with it. You know, you're going to owe some taxes. And so there's things where there, and again, it's not anonymous. There are specific coins that they focus on being anonymous, but if you're talking about like a lot of the mainstream coins, like that's never been their goal, was to be completely anonymous. Yeah. Their goal was to be trustless, which are two different things. Yeah. And so, and sorry for everyone listening, I have a car alarm. Welcome to Harlem, everybody who is listening to the podcast. But yeah, but like that's, and so I see there being more regulation happening in the future, just because even like with some of the most recent regulation, like the government kind of freaked out and they were like, we need to be able to control this. And I think it's something where if you make the mistake and control too much too early, you end up with the problem with New York State had, where they started putting regulations in like very early. And it actually hindered a lot of innovation in the crypto and blockchain space. Yeah. Mostly crypto, like in New York State very early on, and people chose to move their startups elsewhere. Yeah. You know, which like maybe at the time didn't seem like a big deal, but think about like we're the one of the biggest financial capitals in the world. You know, imagine where we would be now if those startups hadn't left, or like they were able to continue, right? And so I really see as like regulation is coming, but I do think there are a few level heads in the government that are listening to the blockchain and crypto communities that are going to try to prevent people from just saying like, we need to completely over-regulate it. But I think like we're not going to exist in a world where there's like no regulation. And I think there's going to be more that comes down to differentiate certain things, you know, as, is this a security or not? Is this or this, that? Like basically saying, is this a brand new type of asset class, or is this something that exists today and you guys need to follow all the rules, right? Because that's kind of what happened with, you know, initial coin offerings, is that the SEC came down and said, hey, this is a security, so you're going to want to get a security lawyer. Yeah. You know, so I really see more regulation coming, but I really see the United States, like the people who are level-headed about blockchain and crypto in the United States, like trying to prevent this from being like, we're going to over-regulate it. And if they did, I honestly think that would just spur more innovation to be like, make it so it's untraceable, which I don't know if that is good. I can't say it's bad, but I don't know if it's necessarily good. The last thing I'll also say, we're going to start seeing a lot more innovation out of countries where the government has been doing a lot to crack down on certain movements. Like one country I'm really watching closely is Nigeria. And for those of you who aren't like aware, last year, I think it was October 20th, their government actually killed several protesters who were protesting police violence. They actually have this special police squad called SARS, no relation to the respiratory illness. Yeah. But it's like special, I think it's like an armed robbery squad or something. I don't remember. I'm sorry to all the Nigerians. Yeah. But like basically it's a special task force that's supposed to like handle like robberies and that kind of stuff. And they're really known for, number one, just robbing people and not stopping robberies. Yeah. Like literally just stealing laptops of people who have IT jobs and stuff like that for no reason, beating up people, imprisoning people for no reason. And there were lots of protests last October, which a lot of those protests cooled off. Not that they halted completely, but cooled off significantly after the Lekki toll gate massacre, where the government opened fire and killed several of the protesters. And at the time, also, they were experiencing those protesters were experiencing something where the government was working with Nigerian banks to actually stop those people from having access to their funds. So their whole bank accounts are frozen, right? That's crazy. And these are just protesters. These people were like buying money for like water, food for protesters. like first aid for protesters, like those type of things, like getting people out of jail. And so the government worked with the banks to get those bank accounts shut off. And so I think it's like it's a famous coalition, coalition or collective. They actually started accepting Bitcoin because their bank accounts were frozen. And so it was I think one of the biggest like kind of protest movements that was using Bitcoin at the time. And they used it again for supplies for protesters, whether it was like water, food, using it to like get lawyers to help people get out of jail who were arrested, and as well as like medical supplies and helping people who have been injured, you know, as a part of these protests, be able to get medical attention. And so I really see, and it's been interesting because even after that, I think it was like January, Nigeria came out with some sort of clarification saying like, oh, like any bank that deals with people with cryptocurrency, like we're going to like find that bank, or basically it's like, we're going to come after the bank if you guys are doing business with people who are doing crypto. Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it was like, I don't think that clarification was necessary. I think it's like, it was necessary for what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
I think like, it was something where it was a signal, but I don't think it really did anything. Or I think it was like, they didn't really need to do it in a way where it was like, people are going to have ways to have crypto that their banks don't really know about. Yeah. You're going to find ways around it. But also I'm like, to me, it was a sign that they intend to do more regulation, actual regulation, because it wasn't new regulation. They're like, this is our interpretation of our existing law. And so, and no one asked for it. So to me, it was just kind of like a petty, very late reaction to how people used crypto during the period of the height of the protests, like months and months later. And I really just see Nigeria being a place where we're going to see a lot of the innovation, because they're experiencing things where it's like people who are just doing basic protests, right, having their bank accounts shut down. And you have people where it's like, it's just easier for them to work in crypto. But it's also like, you know, depending on your relationship with the government, regular banks may not be a good option for you. And also, I don't know if any of you have ever worked with freelancers in Nigeria. It can be actually very hard to figure out how to like pay people. I mean, like there's certain tools, like if you go through like Fiverr and that kind of thing, but if you want to pay someone directly, it can be challenging. And also if you have people who are interested in paying you, this is actually harder. It's, if you want someone to like pay you from Nigeria, it is a pain in the butt to figure that out as well. And because their government regulates so much that like there's tools things like there's things that we take for granted in terms of, you know, being able to use certain financial tools that like they can't use certain things in Nigeria because, you know, the regulations make it actually like very hard to follow the rules. And there's some products that do and can, but there's not as many. And some of that I think also goes to funding and their ecosystem. But then also I think some of it can also be tied back to their government and their need for control, especially over messaging around government policies and policing.
Wow. Yeah, it's a global process. I was going to say problem, but it's a global process because that's just Nigeria's case, right? The U.S. has its own story. El Salvador is trying to be a leader. They're going to have their own process with the getting adoption up. The things they're dealing with are different than, you know, first world, third world. But I definitely agree, right? Third world countries have a lot more incentive, and third world countries with corrupt governments have a lot more incentive.
I'll say our government is very corrupt. It's just that we have, it's like they have enough money already that they're slightly less incentivized to rob us on a regular basis.
They're already doing it on a regular basis. And
I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, they have, I mean, if you look at how much our government leaders make, slightly less incentivized to rob us on a regular basis.
Yes. And I guess the average US citizen is like wealthy. when it goes to like global wealth. Global wealth,
comparatively.
not like U.S. wealth, but like global wealth. For like,
Yeah.
we're not like getting $1 a day. Um, yeah. What is like one piece of advice you would have for the break-in gang? Like, just learning, or life advice, or just like if it's just something future, or just something you've been thinking about lately. Anything.
One thing I'm gonna say is like don't get discouraged, and don't let imposter syndrome stop you. No matter how much you might feel like sometimes you're like, oh wow, I just discovered this whole other thing I don't know. I know some of you are like, that's not a problem for me, but I know for some people they can get discouraged and feel like this isn't a space for me, that kind of thing. Just keep doing what you're doing, and do it in the way that you feel comfortable with. If for you it's podcasts, great. If for you it's like finding random strangers on Twitter and like, talking to them about things, great. Like, don't feel like you have to do it in the way other people do it, and don't let other people make you feel like you don't belong in this space, or like, oh, well, this person's been in this space for like 5 whole years now. And like, like you just, if you don't know it all now, like you're never going to know it. Like, don't let people do that. Cause the one thing I will say that I noticed when I first joined the space was that while there are a lot of very welcoming and warm people, there's also people that use literally every single like term that they know no one outside of blockchain knows, to be able to talk about blockchain, which makes it so that even if you're in the space, you're still like,
what the freak?
Let me Google what is, like you're like,
it's like you say these super financially term words just so I don't understand.
Yeah. And there's times where, and even then, like, we have to also understand there's people where, I can talk to a group of people and say like, oh, fiat versus like crypto. And they'll say like, hey, Anne,
what's fiat?
And that's okay. Like, and I think it's like, just don't let anybody make you feel like, that you don't belong in the space, or you shouldn't be in this space, or you should just like give up. Because the thing is like, now is the time to learn. Now is the time to get into it. Like, whether it's you're just learning on the side, or you're like, I'm going to learn and then get a job in the space, like, just, like, find the way that you learn best. This is not a university class. Like, you don't have to learn in the traditional way if that's not what works for you. And then just don't be discouraged by the people who want to make this an inaccessible space for you.
Yes. Amen. Amen. Crypto was made for everyone.
It's made for everybody. So we need to stop gatekeeping.
Yes. I think it's like, we can go on for the hour, 30 minutes about this. Like, just humans, like our brain's meant to be comfortable in homeostasis. So we feel like we own, or we can control something, right? Like, we can preserve ourselves. So like, if you're hanging on the cliff, it's like, am I going to save you, or am I going to save myself? You don't know until you're in that situation, right?
Well, it's like the crabs in a barrel mentality, right? Where it's like crabs, their natural environment is not a barrel. So when they're all in a barrel together, they pull the other crabs down. But the thing is, it's like the thing I notice is, whether you're in blockchain or any other space, people will think they are in a barrel, and they will be in a wide open field, and they will try to shove you down a prairie dog hole for no reason. And you're like, this was unnecessary.
Crypto it's a new world. It's a new asset class. I won't even, like, crypto as an asset class, but I would say what it's opened up is literally a whole new world of like the digital world we were already in, and the possibilities, the value creation, the money opportunities are literally endless. Like the things we had, like, even on this show, we're going to talk about, like, there's things we haven't even discovered that we're going to do, and new jobs, new things, new fields that we're not even talking. No one's talking about them.
Yeah.
Right? They're not getting attention.
Yeah. I think like one thing I'll leave you guys with is, one of the things I'm most excited about is I'm interested to see what like music artists do with NFTs. And not because I'm like, oh, you can turn your album into an NFT, like that's cool. But like, there's all sorts of other type of like bonus things, or like exclusive NFTs you can only buy if you already have this other NFT. And I think that is really going to be the future. And like, and there's lots of other things you can do with NFTs But that's the thing where I'm the most intrigued, because I think it has the thing to like completely change.
Yeah.
Like if you hear people, if you see anyone that's in blockchain, crypto, NFT, Twitter, one thing they're going to tell you is like the dynamics of business is shifting to a community-based business model. And not necessarily the company is run by the community, but like that you can't really have a company without a community. You don't really have customers, you have a community, and your customers live in that community.
Yeah.
And I really see like the relationship between artists and the people who are their fans. Like you would say it's community now, but I think we're really going to see a new meaning for community in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's about value, it's about ownership. And I think that's what's so cool about this new world, is that like we can, like you and I can keep talking about this for another hour, like because there's so many layers. And that's why like, I guess for us to close, and like you're totally right. Like it's what you said. Like keep learning. Don't be discouraged. I just hopped into this space like not even like, well, I started in 2020. Like I'm very new in this space and breaking gang. And you were amazing.
You're amazing. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have you back. I'll
come back anytime.
Yes, I need to get up to Harlem, even though I know we're not traveling a lot, but you're not traveling a lot.
Eventually. I'm also not doing anything indoors right now. So one day, eventually.
It's all good. But thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. And like, thank you to all of you listening.
Yes, for sure. We learned a lot today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yo, Ann Griffin. It was an awesome conversation. We went to her product management story, her road into the blockchain crypto space. Don't be afraid. Doesn't matter if it's 2021, 2022. When you hear this, 2023, doesn't matter if you got in and we're with Satoshi, whoever they are, he is, she is. You can learn today. It's not too late. Crypto is for everyone. Any technology is for everyone. That's why we're breaking into the future. All things future. Love you guys. We're out of here.